The evening sun was setting over the rolling plains, casting a fiery glow across the horizon as the cattle ranchers began, herding the last of the strays back into the corral. But while the land breathed freedom, one woman lived in the cruel opposite. Her kin had locked her away in a back room of the large farmhouse, the windows nailed shut, the door bolted with heavy wood, all to control her, all to silence her dreams of living her own life. For Lila was not just any woman. She was a heart with fire in it, a voice with courage that could no longer be chained. But her family, driven by pride, greed, and the stubborn grip of tradition, wanted her to marry a man twice her age to merge land and power, wanted her to live as an ornament and bargaining chip, not as a soul that breathed. So they shut her in that room day after day, her cries muffled by the thick wooden walls, her tears staining the floorboards, her heart pounding against the cage they built around her. Yet even in that darkness she clung to hope, whispering into the silence that someone, somehow, would come for her, and that someone rode into town just as the last light slipped away. A cowboy, tall in the saddle, lean and strong, his hat pulled low over eyes that had seen too much hardship and still burned with defiance. His name was Cole, a man who had spent his life out on the ranges, mending fences, breaking wild horses, and living by his own code, a man who believed no one had the right to chain another soul. He had heard whispers in town that the Harrington family was keeping their daughter under lock and key, that she was being forced into something she did not want. And when he heard her name, Lila, his heart clenched, for he had seen her once before, months ago at the spring fair, where her laughter had carried across the meadow like music, where her eyes had held a light that stayed with him through the long, lonely nights. So when he learned she was being held against her will, he knew he could not sit idle. He knew that fate had placed him on this path for a reason, and so he rode to the farmhouse under the cover of twilight, his boots silent as he approached the weathered porch, the door guarded by her kin, men who thought themselves strong but who had never stood against a man with nothing to lose. Cole pushed his way inside, his presence filling the hall with danger and promise. And when they demanded to know what business he had, he said in a voice low and steady, "My business is setting free what should never have been chained." They laughed, thinking him foolish, but they did not know the steel in his veins. They did not see the determination that flared when he thought of Lila locked away. So he strode through the hall, shoving aside those who tried to stop him, until he stood before the bolted door, her prison, the place where she sat curled on the floor, trembling and praying for deliverance. And when his fist pounded the wood, her heart leapt. She pressed her ear to the door, whispering, "Who's there?" And when she heard his voice, rough yet gentle, saying, "It's me, Lila. I've come to take you out of here," tears spilled down her cheeks, for she had thought no one would ever hear her cries. With one swift kick, Cole broke the door open, the wood splintering under his strength. And there she was, standing in the dim lamplight, her dress torn, her hair tangled, but her spirit shining like fire in her eyes. He stepped inside, his arms reaching for her, and she fell against him, sobbing into his chest, feeling for the first time in years what freedom tasted like. But behind them her kin shouted in outrage, storming down the hall with rifles in hand, demanding that she be returned, demanding that she live by their will. Cole turned, holding Lila close, his voice like thunder as he growled, "You'll not chain her again." "Not while I breathe." The men hesitated, for they saw in his eyes the promise of violence, the kind that only a cowboy hardened by the plains could deliver. And in that pause, Cole lifted Lila into his arms, carrying her as though she were the most precious thing he had ever held, striding past the stunned faces of her family, out into the night where the wide world awaited. They shouted threats, swore they would come after her, but the moment the cool air touched her face, Lila felt the chains fall away, her spirit soaring higher than the stars overhead. Cole set her upon his horse, swung up behind her, and with a flick of the reins they galloped into the night, the farmhouse shrinking behind them, the cries of her kin fading into nothing. And as the wind whipped through her hair, she turned her face toward Cole, whispering through trembling lips, "Why would you risk so much for me?" And he answered without hesitation, "Because no one deserves to be a prisoner of their own blood, and because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were worth fighting for." Her heart swelled, not just with gratitude but with something deeper, something she had long denied herself, a hope for love, for freedom, for a life where she could choose her own path. The ride was long, the plains stretching endlessly before them, but for the first time she did not feel lost. for she was with someone who would protect her, who would break every door, face every storm just to see her free. When they finally reached his ranch, he helped her down, steadying her trembling legs, and she looked around at the open land, the corral full of wild horses, the sky painted with stars, and she whispered, This feels like home." Cole smiled, tipping his hat, and said, "It can be, if you'll have it." She stepped closer, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing, and in that moment the darkness of her past fell away, replaced by the promise of a future she had thought impossible. She had been locked away by those who claimed to love her, but she had been freed by a man who truly understood what love meant, not control, not chains, but freedom, respect, and strength. And as she laid her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she knew that she had been carried not just out of a room, but into a life worth living, into the arms of a cowboy who would never let her be silenced again. The night wrapped around them like a blessing, the stars shining as witnesses to a new beginning. And though her kin might still curse and rage, their power over her was gone, for she was no longer theirs to command. She was her own, free and unbroken, and with Cole by her side she would remain that way forever. So if you believe in love that breaks chains, in courage that defies cruelty, and in stories where freedom triumphs over control, then stay with us, because more tales of hope, courage, and cowboy hearts are coming your way. And if you want to hear them first, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now. Join this family of dreamers and believers, and let's ride together into the next story.